Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the trail system north of Elmendorf-Richardson Joint Air Force Base in northern Anchorage, Alaska. The elevation along the base is low, seldomly rising above 200 feet above sea level. With gentle rises and drops in the terrain, the trails in this area are prime exercise alternatives for soldiers at the base. The soldiers' preferred modes of exercise here include riding mountain bikes and jogging along the trails. The base spreads over 74,000 acres and hosts moose, wolves, black bears, and brown bears on its territory. Biologists recommend that people in known bear country avoid rapid movements toward or away from bears, given either action may solicit a predatory or defensive attack by the bears. With this information as our background, we begin our episode today. On Sunday, May 18, 2014, a husband and wife, Jacob and Jessica Gamboa, were stationed on Elmendorf and decided to go to the trail system on the north part of the base for a run together. Jacob was assigned to Elmendorf to the 4th Infantry Brigade Airborne Combat Team in the 25th Infantry Division. Jessica was originally from Sacramento, California, and was a fit and sassy blonde fitness fanatic. She was training to run a half marathon soon. The young couple had added a son to their family just 4 years prior. Together, the Gamboas drove to a parking lot near the trail system and disembarked from their vehicle for a refreshing jog. Spring in Alaska comes on very suddenly. It is easy to argue that this part of the state has only 2 seasons, a brief and bright summer with daylight for nearly 24 hours each day, and long winters with limited daylight hours. Spring and fall pass nearly undetected and last only days in some years. This type of climate requires bears to find food fast to prepare for winter hibernation. In prior episodes, we've discussed sow bears raising their cubs near human population centers. They do this because boars avoid areas populated by people, and food sources are found easily in trash cans and other human waste. Sows who raise their cubs nearer human population centers are larger than others, and tend to have more cubs live to early adulthood, so this practice is an undeniable benefit to them. As Jacob and Jessica bounced along the trails, Jacob's pace began to lead him further ahead of Jessica. He was a soldier and was in great shape, so a more brisk pace was what he was accustomed to, while his wife had a more leisurely pace. Now, base authorities had informed trail visitors that bears and moose are known to travel through the area and may be dangerous. They've issued recommendations to trail users to pack bear spray whenever venturing out for exercise. I could find no source indicating that Jacob and Jessica had brought bear spray, a firearm, or a bear horn along with them on their run this day. As Jacob pulled away from Jessica, I can only imagine that he wasn't worried about his wife, as they'd agreed to travel a specific route. He likely believed that he would complete the course and wait at the vehicle for his wife to complete it as well, but leaving his wife behind would prove to be a tragic and costly wager on his part. As Jessica watched her husband bound off in the distance, she set in on a jogging pace comfortable to her. Soon Jacob was out of view, and Jessica was enjoying the tranquility of nature by herself. Jessica rounded a brushy and blind corner in the trail and glanced up to see a brown bear cub just off the trail she was traveling. The first thing to race through her mind was, where was the mama bear? A sudden overwhelming feeling of dread filled Jessica's mind, and she slowed her pace to a walk as she scanned the brush. A noise in the bushes behind her and to her left drew her full attention. Jessica could see a huge sow brown bear galloping toward her. She would have had time to dispense bear spray had she brought it. As the sow approached her, Jessica put her hands out in front of her as a sign of submission to the sow. She then turned her back slightly toward the bear just before being shoved by both of the sow's paws onto her face. The difference between reality and the surreal arrived in the form of searing pain in Jessica's body with each bite from the bear's jaws. Jessica knew she couldn't possibly fight off this bear and hoped that playing dead would end this confrontation before too much damage was done to her. The sow straddled her as she lay on the ground, bit into her buttocks, and lifted Jessica completely off the ground. While being carried, Jessica had fleeting thoughts of meeting her death and longed to see her son. She was carried about 10 feet across the trail toward where the cubs were located. After dropping Jessica into the grass, the sow decided to make sure that there was no threat posed to her cubs. The woman curled into the fetal position, hoping to shield herself from any further damage from the bear. The sow was unconvinced of Jessica's attempt to play dead and bit and slashed her a few more times before scanning the brush toward her cubs. Jessica didn't move during this reprieve in her attack. Before leaving, the sow slashed her a few more times, before biting her and watching for a reaction. The bear stared and huffed mere inches from Jessica's face before fading into the brush. The woman knew better than to hop right up. She laid still for several minutes just in case the sow was nearby watching her for signs of life. She lifted her head and glanced around to see if she could locate the sow, before slowly climbing to her feet. Feeling the pain and seeing the blood gushing from her injuries, Jessica knew she had to get somewhere that someone would more easily find her. Presently located off the trail and in tall grass, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, so she dragged herself into the middle of the trail. Now exhausted and bordering on shock, she flopped onto her back and rested. After composing herself and gathering strength, Jessica began looking over her surroundings. Her blood painted the grass and soil everywhere she looked, like a macabre work of art. Blood pulsed from a wound in her neck, and she began to yell for Jacob, hoping he was somehow nearby her. Hearing no reply from her husband, Jessica's mind ran through her remaining options. She looked toward the sky and muttered a prayer, hoping for intervention in her predicament. Praying for enough strength to make it to the truck, she slowly pulled herself to her feet. Jessica began assessing the damage the sow had done to her body. Her right leg seemed to work fine, despite being gashed and bleeding. Her left leg hadn't fared nearly as well, and didn't function properly. It was gashed more severely, and went weak when she put her weight on it. Jessica began to slowly limp her way down the trail while putting pressure on the wound in her neck. This slowed her blood loss, but she knew that it would only be a matter of time before she would need serious medical assistance. As Jessica stumbled down the trail, her mind continually flashed to thoughts of her son. She walked around a bend in the trail and began pushing her way up a hill, through brush, and in the direction that would take her toward help. The severely wounded woman walked for almost 2 miles before seeing a white pickup truck slowly approaching her location. Her first thoughts were that it was Jacob, but this truck model differed from theirs. A senior medic from the base was out for a day of fishing in the remote area. Sergeant Colin Gillikin was originally from Michigan and was stationed at Elmendorf. Seeing Jessica from a short distance, Sergeant Gillikin initially thought she was covered in mud and wondered if she may have slipped or was tired. She was curiously holding her neck, so he decided to investigate what had happened. Jessica didn't appear to be in distress to the medic as he approached, and asked her what was going on. She informed him that she had been attacked by a bear. Then the strange incident began to make more sense to him. He guided her to his truck and noticed that what he thought was mud caked on her shirt was coagulated blood mixed with dirt. Once he got Jessica loaded into his truck, he had her maintain pressure on her neck while they bounced back down the trail toward medical attention. As they were en route, he dialed 911 to notify first responders and develop a solution for Jessica. The medic assessed her neck wound and didn't identify any arterial bleeding that was urgent. Their best option was to get her to the hospital as fast as possible. The medic had no first aid supplies, having cleaned his truck a few days prior. By the time Jacob had completed the pre-planned jogging route and returned to the truck, all he had to do was wait for Jessica to arrive. He knew she would likely be several minutes behind him, but undoubtedly expected her to arrive soon. After 10 minutes passed, Jacob's concerns began to grow. Separating while they jogged was ordinary for the couple, but Jessica was never too far behind Jacob in her return. After giving her ample time to make up the distance separating them, Jacob knew something was up and raced to report his wife as missing. Sergeant Gillikin safely transported Jessica to the hospital on base, where her condition was stabilized. The staff at the base knew the extent of Jessica's injuries was beyond their scope of care and arranged for transportation for her to Alaska Native Medical Center in Anchorage. She was listed in stable condition after her wounds were cleaned and sutured shut to stop them from bleeding. While in the hospital, Jessica was placed on blood thinners and monitored after a blood clot was discovered in her head. Surgeons reattached her ear and sutured deep gashes on the back of her head closed. While examining her for less obvious trauma, doctors discovered that her neck was broken during the attack. She had bites all over her body and deep lacerations on her arms and both legs. Jessica later commented that she was bruised all over during the attack. A brief investigation ensued after Jessica's attack. Evidence at the attack scene revealed 7-inch wide rear paw tracks left by the sow. According to investigators, this would put the bear somewhere between 7 and 8 feet in height and weighing over 600 pounds. Following his heroic and helpful actions, Sergeant Gillikin indicated that the experience changed his life. He says he's finally realized that there is something out there bigger than himself. The conservation officer for the base, Mark Sledge, was perplexed and impressed by Jessica's survival instincts. He indicated that she was heroic to have experienced such physical trauma and still survived. Base officials immediately closed the road where Jessica's attack occurred to prevent further confrontations with the sow and her cubs. This allowed them to keep the attack site free from interference and corruption of evidence. Jessica's attack was the first one since 2010 and mirrored an attack featured in our episode regarding Staff Sergeant Seth Michael Plant. I've linked to his episode in the video article below if you would like to review it. We will also have an episode discussing the 2010 attack on 4 girls on the base mentioned previously soon. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. If Jacob had stayed near his wife, could this attack have been prevented? Would bear spray have deterred the sow from attacking Jessica? What do you think Jessica could have done before the attack to avoid being mauled? What would you do if you came around the corner and spotted 3 brown bears only a few yards from you? I will be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us into very familiar territory. We're going to talk about another brown bear attack at Skilac Lake on the Kenai Peninsula in southern Alaska. At the juncture of Hidden Creek and Skilac Lake, there is a gravel campground that can be accessed by hiking trail, boat, or plane, and allows visitors to rest on the banks of Hidden Creek. The area around the creek and the trail that follows it is a broad valley covered in dense alderbrush and spruce stands. The cover here is low-growing, which creates an impenetrable visual screen that shelters bears and allows them to stalk prey. The creeks that feed into Skilac Lake provide the salmon access to breeding and rearing grounds. Their bodies provide important nutrients for bears and many other animals. They are so essential to bears that they've been known to defend their fishing grounds to the death from other bears and possibly humans. On Friday, June 11th, 2021, a couple we will refer to as Jennifer and Jake had planned a romantic camping trip together. Jake and Jennifer drove to the parking lot at the Upper Skilac Lake campground and packed their supplies into their kayaks. They brought with them a very thorough first aid kit, bear spray, and an air horn. The campers packed their gear into the storage hatch of their kayaks, stuffed to the brim with sleeping bags, tents, and other necessities. When ready to launch their kayaks, they boarded their crafts and paddled into the cold waters. As they floated along the shore of Skilac Lake, the beautiful scenery mesmerized them. The 6-mile journey to Hidden Creek took a few hours in the afternoon, and upon arrival they were eager to get ashore to set up camp. After arriving at Hidden Creek, the couple beached their kayaks and began offloading their gear. They packed it a short distance to the established campground and began laying out their tent. The campers had plenty of time to finish setting up their camp just before starting dinner to enjoy the solitude and peace of the lake. As the shadows grew long, Jake and Jennifer decided to call it a night. They crawled into their sleeping bags, and the silence granted quick slumber to them. As they slept, a huge brown bear had been searching the creek bank for anything to eat. Finding regular sources of food is extremely important to bears, and this one was in a very aggressive mood as it needed the food there. Right around midnight, Jake was shaken awake by Jennifer. She woke him because she'd heard something moving very near the outside of their tent. As Jake came to his senses, he groped around their tent searching for the bear spray they'd brought with them. They decided they should look outside the tent door and see what it was that was creeping around them. Just as they peered out of a crack in their tent flap, they could see a huge round bear head coming into their view, and it was growing quickly. They realized the bear was charging toward them, and they had nowhere to go. As they retreated from the open tent flap, they could feel the overwhelming power of the bear slam into them and press them into the cool ground beneath the tent fabric. The tent material acted as a trap to them and held them in place for the bear as it took turns attacking Jake, and then Jennifer, and Jake once again. Given it was dark and the campers were covered in tent fabric, the bear had no idea what part of its victims it was clawing or biting. But it didn't matter, as whatever it could get into its mouth was bitten, and whatever it could strike with its claws was tattered. The darkness of the night and the added obstruction of the tent complicated any retreat the campers would try to make. The brown bear was attacking them for only a matter of a few seconds, but it seemed like much longer. By the time the bear had left their tent, Jake had severe puncture wounds on his legs and arms. Some of his wounds went so deep into his muscle tissue that his legs were not completely functional. Jennifer was somehow less battered, but had several gashes and punctures in her legs and arms as well. Even though the tent completely obscured the campers' vision, it protected them by limiting the bear's attack. As the campers were still terrified within their collapsed tent, they knew they would have to leave it to get help and risk running into the bear once again. For all they knew, the massive Bruin may have laid down nearby for a rest and could be watching them right now. Determining that they had no other choice, they grabbed a few supplies and began making their way back to their kayaks beached on the shore. They nervously groped their way along the trail while scanning the area with their headlamps, searching for the bear. Their heads would jerk back and forth as any noise in the brush brought their immediate attention. At the kayaks, Jake began searching through the contents of the first aid kit they'd brought on their trip. He was looking for one item in particular and found a couple of packets near the bottom. The product is called Quick Clot, and it is a compound that uses the chemistry of the blood to stop bleeding in wounds. It is frequently used in military trauma kits and has been one of the first treatments in the field by medics for the last few decades. Quick Clot works by a substance called kaolin, which quickly absorbs liquid factors in the blood. This leaves a higher concentration of platelets and other mechanical clotting factors, which will stop the bleeding, instead of them being washed away by the excess liquid. In the laboratory, test pigs were given a lethal wound, and Quick Clot was applied to them. The pigs had a 100% survival rate when this product was properly administered. Jake pulled out the kaolin-soaked Quick Clot bandages and applied them to Jennifer's most serious wounds, and she applied them to his. While keeping a wary eye out for the bear, Jake and Jennifer boarded their kayaks and painfully pushed away from the shore at only a few minutes after midnight. Skilac Lake is surrounded by mountains, and during the night Chinook winds can make the water choppy and rough. But this night the campers had an unusually calm return trip. The stars reflected on the calm lake surface, portraying a more peaceful scene than what they had just experienced. It took them a few hours to make the trip during the daytime, without any injuries. By 2 a.m. they had covered the 6 miles and returned to Upper Skilac Lake campground. As soon as they paddled up, they began yelling for help. Their cries were met with several campers emerging from their tents. As the responders gathered around the kayakers, they helped them out of their kayaks. Jake's injuries to his legs were so severe that he could not stand up and had to be assisted from his kayak. Jamie Nelson was raised in Kenai and was awakened by the campers' screams. He was camped with his family and was among those who responded to Jake and Jennifer's cries. The responding campers used cell phones packed with them to reach out to medical professionals. An ambulance was dispatched to the campground while the campers tried to keep Jake warm and from slipping into shock. Within 30 minutes, the ambulance had arrived, followed in only a few more minutes by the medevac helicopter. Jake was loaded aboard and flown to the nearest hospital, while Jennifer made the trip in the ambulance, with less life-threatening injuries. The next day, one of Jake's friends returned with biologists to assist in the investigation of the attack on Jake and Jennifer. He expressed gratitude to Nelson and relayed the information that they were now in stable condition. Nelson stated that seeing so many people respond to the kayakers' late-night appearance at their campsite was life-affirming. He remarked that when Alaskans see someone in trouble, they will come running to help. During the investigation, Alaska Department of Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service agents converged on the attack site. While there, they collected DNA evidence from the tent left by the bear, as well as rounded up all of Jake and Jennifer's belongings. They reported that there were no bears anywhere near the attack site, and sign that was left there was inconclusive. After analyzing all the evidence, they concluded that the attack was unprovoked. They also commented that Jake and Jennifer may not have survived had they not been well prepared. Their comprehensive first aid kit, bear spray, and bear horn demonstrated a well-planned trip that accounted for the potential of a bear attack. ADFG officials closed Hidden Creek Trail to allow investigators to complete their investigation, and it was reopened the following Sunday. A search for the bear was fruitless, and it was not pursued for any further action. Although Jake and Jennifer received gashes and puncture wounds on their legs and arms, their efforts in planning for their own safety paid dividends. To have a brown bear attack you while you're sleeping in your tent is extremely rare, and being prepared may be the only option campers may have for survival. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Did the bear attack Jake and Jennifer because they were close to Hidden Creek and the salmon it contained? Do you think the bear was surprised by the campers after stumbling into the tent and attacked out of defensive motives? Did the tent help or hurt the campers' efforts to avoid being attacked by the bear? Do you plan to add Quick Clot or similar product to your first aid kit? I hope so. I'll enjoy reading and replying to your comments, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Upper Kenai Trail, accessed from the Skilac Lake Loop Road on the Kenai Peninsula in South Alaska. In some of our previous episodes, we've discussed attacks near this location, and this one took place only a few hundred yards from Hidden Creek. Near Hidden Creek, the terrain opens up to a broad yet small valley. On the west end of that valley, Hidden Creek separates from the Kenai River, which turns east. As it turns, the Kenai River enters a steep canyon, but doesn't lack in alderbrush and patches of Sitka spruce. This canyon forms a boundary of physically demanding terrain, which tends to keep human traffic to a minimum. The steep slopes retreat from Skilac Lake and the fish offered to sportsmen there, leaving only adventuresome folks to appreciate the isolation and solitude of the Upper Kenai River Trail. The allure of wilderness has always beckoned to primitive pilgrims who appreciate the purity and privacy of isolated areas. On June 29th, around 7:38 p.m., Jason Umbriaco and his 14-week-old border collie Buckley were hiking the Upper Kenai Trail and enjoying time in the woods. Jason was visiting the area from Montana and had been learning to live with a brain injury he'd suffered in 2008. He'd leaned on dogs to help him in his rehabilitation. Buckley was his most recent support animal, helping him in his recovery. As the man and his trusty companion were trudging through the bushes, making their way along the trail, they had no idea what surprise lay in wait for them. A brown bear sow and her 2 cubs were trying to find salmon along the banks of the river and headed in a direct route toward the man and his dog. As Jason and Buckley rounded a corner, they heard a rustling in the bushes just above the trail. To Jason's horror, a massive brown bear sow emerged from the brush, followed by her 2 cubs. Jason froze at the sight of the bears and slowly reached for his bear spray. Buckley instantly rose to his owner's defense and furiously closed in on the bears. He dashed toward the sow and her cubs while barking and growling, as if he was going to scare them. The sow reacted with confusion and rage as the dog seemed to threaten her and her cubs. She swatted at the dog and spun in defense of her young ones. Jason wasn't sure what to do as Buckley continually attacked the bears, while ignoring his owner's instructions to come back. After hearing Jason's yelling, the sow lifted her head from snapping at Buckley and set her dreaded gaze on the man. The fury in her eyes communicated her rage as she covered the 50 feet separating them in a flash, before Jason could flip the safety cap off of his bear spray. Jason lifted his hands toward his head as the sow bore down on him. By the time the sow clamped her jaws onto Jason's arm near his elbow, the reality of the situation had set in. He realized this was not some horrific nightmare, but something he had to deal with quickly. The sow shook her head back and forth, jostling Jason violently. As soon as she released her grip on his arm, Jason did the only thing that made sense to him at the time. He leapt from the bank of the river, hoping the sow would relent in her attack on him. As the cold water shocked him into realizing what he had just done, he struggled toward the surface. The sow didn't miss a beat and charged into the water after Jason. By now he had stood to his feet as the rushing water pushed around his waist. The sow sank her giant yellow canines into his shoulder and bit down while twisting her head violently. Quickly ripping deep gashes with her teeth, the sow decided to check on her cubs and made her way out of the river, leaving Jason battered but alive. Jason watched as the sow and her cubs beat a hasty retreat as he called for Buckley. After a brief search, the stress of the attack led Jason to head back to his vehicle to seek medical attention for the wounds the sow had inflicted on his body. Buckley was nowhere to be found and couldn't be heard barking in reply to his calls. Jason hiked quickly, trying to put as much distance between him and the brown bears as he could. Once Jason arrived at his vehicle, he accessed his cell phone and gratefully received service. He called 911 and requested help to his location. While under care at the hospital in Soldotna, the details of Jason's attack circulated quickly among the staff and to the helpful ears of a nurse by the name of Bonnie Nichols. Bonnie had heard from the hospital's chaplain that Buckley was still missing after Jason's condition had stabilized. Bonnie informed Jason that if he would send her a picture of Buckley, she would post it on her social media platforms to try to help locate him. It turned out that a woman named Wendy Wilson was driving to Anchorage the day Jason and Buckley had the run-in with the sow. She had stopped along the roadside after seeing a stray dog trotting down the shoulder of the road. After rounding up the dog, who turned out to be Buckley, Wendy took him home with her and made sure he had food and a warm place to stay for the night. He was missing his collar with his dog tags, which were pulled off at some point, and the scrap with the bears. Jason identified the pictures Wendy had sent to Bonnie and replied to her social media post. After spending one night at the hospital, Jason was discharged and was ultimately reunited with Buckley. Authorities issued some valuable information to the public following Jason and Buckley's attack. They requested that forest visitors keep an eye out for animal carcasses or the scent of a dead animal. The presence of eagles, magpies, crows, ravens, and gray jays may indicate that there is an animal carcass nearby that may draw hungry bears to the area. Ravens have been observed in a coordinated effort to rouse sleeping bears to get them to catch fish, from which the ravens will receive the scraps. The relationship between predators and the animals supported by their success is an interesting example of how vital the salmon runs are to many species. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think this attack may have played out differently if Jason had had Buckley on a leash? Given this attack happened too quickly for Jason to dispense his bear spray, would a firearm have made any difference? The next time you see a murder of crows, will you be on the lookout for a sleuth of bears? I will gladly read and reply to your comments, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.